Do you remember how quiet everything used to be? How you'd fall asleep at a sleepover with the DVD menu just looping forever? Or how when you would turn on your family computer, the Windows XP music would chime in an empty room? Do you remember how it felt to wait in the back of your computer room for Pop Tropica to load? Back then, in our childhoods, nothing was instant. Everything had to load. And somehow, that silence of the in-between became our entire childhood. This is a video about that weird feeling, the one that you get when you think about your childhood and those moments of the in-between. This is about liminality and the haunted piece of growing up in the early 2000s. So the first thing that we need to knock out of the way is what the definition of liminality is. So the word liminal originates from the word limin, and that means a threshold or a space in between two states. So essentially, liminality and that feeling usually comes from the transition between two things. Liminal spaces, if we're talking about physical spaces, are spaces that aren't necessarily meant to be lived in, but just passed through. So think of like empty parking lots at night or hallways or things like that. The idea of liminal spaces and the popularity of them has exploded since the popularity of the backrooms has occurred. So the backrooms was a huge catalyst for people talking about liminal spaces, but they've always been a thing, and that feeling of liminality has also always been a thing. So the first sense of liminality from our childhoods in the early 2000s that I'm going to be talking about today is DVD menus. There are several videos that I'll link down below that talk about the lost art of DVD menus, but today I'm specifically going to be talking about the ones that felt very liminal and overall had that transitional sense. Before streaming and before autoplay, there were DVD menus. DVD menus from the early 2000s kind of fall into three different categories in my opinion. The first one being just static images. They were just still images either created specifically for the DVD menu or they were just taken straight out of the movie. There were also a lot of looping DVD menus that were taken straight out of movies, either images or videos. So think of like a 30-second clip out of the movie that they would just play over and over again, or they would cut a couple of them together. While researching for this video, I found several different examples of that, and I feel like the majority of DVD menus fall under that category. Now, the third category is the category that really stuck with us. And when we think about our childhood and DVD menus specifically, I feel like the memories that are brought up are from these types of DVD menus, and those are ones that were created specifically for the DVD. Some that immediately come to mind is like Superbad. For the Superbad DVD menu, they had the cast like dance in front of like a green screen or something. I think it's just a silhouette of them dancing, but it's a really long loop and it's fun to watch. There's other content in the DVD menu than from the actual movie itself. Now, obviously, some of these DVD menus were more liminal than others, but there are reasons why DVD menus themselves are inherently liminal and why they felt so liminal as kids. Firstly, these moments, the DVD menus themselves, were the space before the actual content. So even if the content was made specifically for the DVD menu, we're still there for the DVD. So it's essentially that transitional space. Also, they were designed to be skipped. Like, you weren't really supposed to sit there and watch the DVD menus on a loop, but at least for me when I was a kid and the friends that I was around, that happened really often. Either we were at like a sleepover and the DVD menu just kept looping as we were asleep, or we would just get caught up in what we were looking at for the DVD menu and we would just sit there and watch it. I always really enjoyed seeing what content the DVD menus had, so we kind of lived in those spaces as kids. And in general, when you're a kid, you're not in control of much. You exist in that in-between a lot. So maybe you didn't have access to a remote or something and you have memories of you not being able to turn the DVD menu off and you're kind of just forced to watch it over and over again. I know I have those memories for sure. So there are a few examples that are very liminal DVD menus that come to mind that I want to talk about. The first one is the Lorax. When this came out, I remember there was just kind of a strange feeling of uneasiness when I watched it because the characters were essentially breaking the fourth wall. And that was a theme that I noticed a lot throughout these early 2000s DVD menus. The one for the Lorax DVD is essentially just a very beautiful scene of the trees and stuff from the Lorax, and you're either watching characters walk by you or float by you on this river. And I distinctly remember as a kid feeling uncomfortable that the Lorax looked at me. Like I was like you don't see characters really break the fourth wall in animated or early 2000s movies that much. And especially if you're used to watching that movie and you know that the characters don't break the fourth wall, when you see them do it in the DVD menu, you're like, something feels a little bit off here. And again, I noticed that in a lot of other DVD menus as well. So that was something that I thought was kind of eerie.
Hello, I'm Hank Hill, and I want to thank you for buying the DVD of the first season of King of the Hill.
Some other honorable mentions that I really like are Brother Bear. I really like the way that DVD menu looks. I think it's just beautiful, and again, it's just very nature-y, and you definitely feel like you're in the transition between watching the actual movie, but you're not quite there. Same thing with Alice in Wonderland. This one is just really cool to look at in general because you're kind of like in the rabbit hole, so I really like that one. Now, one that I think stood out to me the absolute most as a kid is the Finding Nemo one. The Finding Nemo DVD menu starts out with you literally just looking into the vast, unknown, empty ocean. You've seen nothing but water. It makes you feel so small. It's a little bit scary, to be honest. And then you move over, it pans over to the coral reef. And I think that this part is really pretty. I think that the way that it moves with the waves is really pretty, and I think that the music that plays is really beautiful as well. And I always really enjoyed this menu as a kid, but I think the beginning is a little bit liminal and a little bit freaky, and the whole thing definitely gives you that transitional vibe of you stepping, you're putting your toe into the movie, you're almost there but you're not quite, and that transitional period is liminal in itself. The next thing I want to talk about is console startups. Now, in the early 2000s and the 90s as well, I feel like they were much more liminal than they are now. Something about them gave you more of that transitional eerie feeling, but they also just had like something about them was like already nostalgic even when they first came out. So I think that that's a really interesting. First one that comes to mind is Sega. I'm gonna play that right now. To me, it's super liminal looking, and it's just a very cool console startup in general. Something else that really comes to mind is Xbox 360 specifically. I remember our Xbox took a little bit to load up, so you were kind of on that startup screen for a little longer than modern consoles, obviously. And just like hearing the sound and watching it, there's just something about it that is so different from modern ones. I don't know how to explain it, to be honest. Same thing as well with Nintendo DS's and Wii's as well. A Nintendo DS is such a nostalgic startup. Like, I played my DS like every single night for years as a kid, and same thing with a Wii. I think I will always cherish the feeling that those older startups gave me, and I don't feel that way about the newer ones at all. Now, obviously, the startups for the video games and the consoles weren't the only things that felt super liminal in the early 2000s. Something else was obviously the games themselves. The first one that comes to mind is early Minecraft. I knew a lot of people that played Minecraft when it first dropped, and obviously I eventually played myself, and there's just a feeling that cannot be replicated with modern Minecraft. The worlds themselves would be very silent until they weren't. You would either hear beautiful music made by C418 or really scary, eerie sounds that made you feel like you weren't alone, even though you were. Obviously, there were mobs and there were villagers, but really early on in Minecraft, the myths and the legends started of other people, specifically Herobrine and other mythical creatures, being with you in your game. So obviously, I wasn't the only one that had that feeling evoked out of me. This game made a lot of people feel a little bit eerie and liminal, but we loved it. We ate that shit up. Again, something about the music was just so beautiful, and paired with the atmosphere and the ambiance that they created, it was just a really interesting dynamic. The entire game made you feel transitional and liminal, because while there was technically an end goal, the main thing would be that it's up to you to create your world. And so again, that transitional feeling almost never left. Minecraft itself, in my opinion, is pure liminality. The music composed by C418 is still some of my favorite music ever composed in the history of the world. I listen to it all the time when I paint or when I do honestly anything. It's like the perfect background music. It's minimalist and ambient. I don't know, there's just something so beautiful about it. It made the game feel more emotional. It gave your character emotion. It made looking at the sunset 10 times more beautiful. It didn't like hype you up in the game either. It slowed things down. It made the silence almost louder. I think Minecraft was such a beautiful example, and still is, of pure liminality in a video game. The world itself that you're put in is made through procedural generation. So what that means in video games is that algorithmically the world is created technically at random. So it's still using all of the same elements, but it's creating new worlds, and specifically in Minecraft, putting biomes and together at random, if that makes sense. So instead of every single detail of the world that you're put in Minecraft being manually, made, it's just kind of made at random. So every single world or seed in Minecraft felt eerily familiar, but also completely different than anything that you had seen previously. With endless terrain, no borders, and really early on, no map, it was a true liminal space in digital form. Pair that with the empty villages that you might stumble across, or just like weird things that were generated, the abandoned mine shafts, all that stuff. It just gave you such a really good eerie feeling. It was a place with no history, but you still felt like a lot had already happened there. So obviously Minecraft is one of my favorite examples of liminality in video games, but there are a ton more video games that gave me that feeling as a kid as well. So I want to talk about demos of video games. I know that's kind of random, but as a kid, I was somebody that I felt like I always had the demo of a video game and not the actual game itself. Demos are usually just a small snippet of a video game with the majority of the features being cut out. So you can just get a preview of what the video game is kind of like. I had stacks and stacks of demo like DVDs and computer games and video games as a kid, and I really do feel like I played demos more than actual video games. I feel like I don't really know specifically where we would get all of the demos from, either like friends, cereal boxes. Like I feel like in the early 2000s, like people were just kind of like throwing like demos at me. I don't know, I just feel like I had a lot. If you could remember like any specific demos and how you got them as a kid, let me know, because I feel like that's a really interesting topic. I might make a whole video on that, honestly. So one of them I remember having, and again I have no idea how we actually got it, was a demo for Spyro. On paper, Spyro is just a cute little platformer about a little purple dragon, and the goal is to collect gems and I think fight bosses or something like that as well. If you played it as a kid though, you know that something about it was kind of special, especially in its liminality. Something just felt kind of off about the world that Spyro was in, especially in the demo that I had. I remember just gliding through as Spyro through these empty worlds, and there were platforms and gems to collect, but I was completely alone. There was just a vibe about it. It wasn't cozy, but it wasn't scary either. It was just kind of off. The soundtrack itself is made by Stuart Copeland. I would describe it as like vibey, but like isolated as well. And that game stuck with me forever. I still think about it all the time, and I didn't even have the full video game. Something else that I remember playing so often was Halo 3. But the funny thing was that we didn't have the full Halo 3, and if we did, I don't ever remember playing it. We would play the multiplayer disc. So I had to do some research because I honestly thought that I like imagined this, but we did have a full disc that was made specifically for multiplayer on Halo 3. It's called the Halo 3 Multiplayer Experience Disc. Now I don't think we had Xbox Live, and if we did, we just didn't have it very often. So it was just me and my brother playing Halo 3 multiplayer. So it was literally just 1 versus 1. With this Halo 3 multiplayer experience disc, they give you 24 maps. Now, I don't think the maps are like huge, especially in today's standards for video games, but they did such a good job of world building for each of these maps. They all felt so different and so alive, even though there was nobody else there and you were alone. And it was always so fun to play and explore these maps. Like on a Saturday morning, me and my brother would get up and we would kind of 1v1 each other. One of us would get pissed off, usually me, and then we would just explore the map. So I have a lot of memories of like just looking around these places and like looking at every detail. I remember that my favorite ones were the ones that felt like they had the most life to them. I remember like weird alien plants like squelching and like having like liquid come out of them. I remember aliens like twitching in a tube, like just crazy shit that like just really was fun to watch and look at. After researching for this video, I actually discovered that there's a lot of creepypastas and stuff that's been written from this exact video game. So I think that that's so interesting because other people felt the creepy eeriness of it too. And I think I was too young, obviously, to be on the internet and be in those communities at that time. But the fact that that exists now is so, so cool to me. Because again, people just kind of created these cool stories out of exactly what I was already feeling. So I found this one video, shout out to the librarian here on YouTube. He made a really cool video called Exploring Halo 3 Maps, and I think that that is like a really, really good peek into what it was like to play, because he was completely by himself just like we were. He talks about how there was this video back in the day of this ghost on one of the maps. It was just one person and his friend playing, so it was just the two of them. And he said his friend went to go eat or something, and so he wasn't active, and his friend was just jumping around by himself. And then all of a sudden there was like another player there, and it was a different color than his friend and everything. And it was so funny to like watch the video, because if that would have happened to me, I would have freaked the fuck out. I feel like that was like my biggest fear playing one of these types of games. So I'm gonna go ahead and play the video now for you, because I thought it was so interesting and cute, honestly. So in all, I am honestly kind of glad that other people felt the liminality of this game just like I did. Same thing with Minecraft and DVD intros too. I feel like people have always kind of felt those same feelings, and so it's comforting knowing that those transitional weird periods of my childhood weren't like I wasn't alone in them, and that other people experienced those same things. So by the definition of liminality, childhood itself is liminal. Childhood itself is a transitional period for everyone. So to think of the early 2000s and how liminal the media was in general, it just added on to those feelings that I think we would have already experienced. As a child, you're on your way to becoming someone, but you're just not quite there yet. So no matter what, we would have had those feelings. Things like Minecraft, Halo 3, and other examples from our childhood just added on to that weird transitional period. The world itself was in a transitional period with technology. So for those of us raised in the early 2000s, even our screens themselves were liminal. The internet was new and glitchy, but it was also really magical. And maybe that's why I and others feel it so deeply now, because that in-between space was where we learned how to feel. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see anything like this, maybe a part 2 with other childhood early 2000s liminal media, then please let me know. And if you think of anything that I either didn't talk about today or just evokes that feeling in you, please leave a comment down below. I am so interested and I would love to hear it. Have a good one.